what extent do we think of our mobile phone as our physical extension? And she has evidence, it's preliminary research, but she has evidence that we do think of it as part of our body, essentially. Essentially, what we are trying to look at is what is the impact of technology, the cumulative impact of technology on our basic human being in terms of his physicality or in terms of his personality, how our very self is changing as a result of technology. And the perspective is a little bit that, you know, technological change has been always here, and we have been talking about the internet in particular for about 20 years now. But the question is this change continuous, or do you have times when some discontinuous change, cumulative change, basically creates some qualitative change in people's lives? And this is really a little bit what we are after. Of course, when you have a project like this, it's very difficult to start. You know, like, where do you start? And we have quickly realized that we have got to approach this problem from multiple angles. Which technologies are available? So, you know, look at this problem from the perspective of supply, what technologies emerge, and also, you know, to see what firms are interested in. So it's great, all these technologies are available, but what are the technologies that firms would like to explore a little bit more? So where are investments going on? So here are a couple of highlights. You don't necessarily have to read them, but basically went through industry by industry, trying to see, you know, what major changes do we expect in these industries. Another thing we did is we went to see art and media. You know, what is it? How does the general public sort of fantasize about future lives, about the changes in our human behavior? And finally, you know, we realized we are not the only ones thinking about this. There are a lot of futurologists. In particular, you know, like this, you probably have gone through, you come across Ray Kurzweil's theory about singularity. This notion that there is continuous change. You know, here he represents basically the power of computing, the power of computers as they evolve, and it's an exponential change. And the basic idea is that you know, as this continuous change happens, at some point you have got discontinuous change. You've got a qualitative change, and this is what he sort of predicts. So we have looked we have looked at this problem from very, very many angles, and I think we'll continue doing this for quite a while. So what is the sort of like preliminary conclusions that emerged? One of the conclusions that emerges is that if you look at digitization, which is sort of like, could be the summarizing theme of all this technological change, then the last 20 years is really about digitization in the context of entertainment and communication. Okay, so a lot of content, the internet has been created, most of the content has been migrating to the internet, and we have gotten tremendous development in devices that allow us to access this content, not just in terms of, you know, like consuming it, but also in uploading content on the internet and sharing it with others. And that is definitely been, you know, in the last 20 years, a very important theme. What we are seeing for the next 20 years is that this digitization is going to be impacting our physical world. David has been talking about retail and the impact it has on retail. And I think it is going to have an impact on pretty much every aspect of our lives, from healthcare to manufacturing to our jobs. And this is really something that might be different from the last 20 years. So just a couple of highlights. So if I'm thinking about the Internet of Things, this whole notion that little devices, millions and billions of devices, can be connected to the internet. These devices can be reached, they can provide us data, but we can also interact with them. In fact, these devices can interact with one another, creating processes that are very difficult to predict, but this is really a new internet, if you wish. This whole notion of big data applications, everybody talks about big data. Nobody knows what exactly it is. We all understand that it has to do with a lot of data being available, and we have the opportunity to analyze this data. It is not clear how is this different from the past, but clearly what we find is that incredible applications emerge. So, just talking about mobile phones, and intuitively all of us understand that mobile provides us with the opportunity to follow everybody's location. This has incredible opportunities for marketers. If we know where you are, we can target advertising to you. But actually, we don't quite know how to do this. So we know that the data is available, and maybe big data means that a lot of data is available, but we use it, but we don't exploit its full potential. We are developing the tools as we speak to really create a qualitative change in that domain. The notion of robotics, like many of these big technology companies who have been in the digital world completely, think of Facebook or think of Google and many others, what they have realized is that the physical world is important, and they can bring all this data and all this content to the physical world, and they have invested heavily into robots and robotics. Nobody actually knows what exactly this is going to be used for, but there is an intuition that the world is ready to use all this information to change our physical life as well. The idea that production might benefit in a major way from digitization, that we can do basically extreme mass customization with 3D printing, and the whole notion that retail, like David has been talking about retail and the importance of physical environment, whole new delivery systems with drones are being explored and thought about. And then there are lots of thinkers who believe that all these changes that are happening in our microeconomics are going to have a major impact on our macroeconomics, that labor markets are going to change. The way our political system works is going to change. So what is it that we are looking at when we talk about future lives? These macro changes, how are they going to maybe change our very self or very personalities? This is really what we have been looking at. And we have looked at really 3 domains. The time and space domain. So how time and space, we are going to be thinking differently about time and space. How are we going to think about our physicality differently? Or body differently? And finally, what is our attitude towards connectedness? How much we expect to be connected and how much it becomes an everyday reality as opposed to something that we have to seek. So in terms of time and space, what we find is that our biology determines very much our rhythm of life. We have to go to sleep during the night. We are typically going to work, and for many of us, the reality is that we wake up in the morning, we sort of go to work, and then at around 5, 6, 7, depending on your job, you basically start going home, you have dinner, and again, the cycle starts again. So this is very much ingrained in our physicality and in our biology. Yet, some of this daily rhythm is being disrupted in a major way by technology. So if I'm thinking about just the organization of the week, the idea that you can have a vacation and you can go away, well, this is for many of us very, very difficult to realize as we are permanently connected. How many of you are sending emails, on Sunday night, just to prepare the week, or just to check your emails to make sure that you're not going to have an avalanche of things to do on Monday morning? So, this rhythm and the space that separates work from home, from vacation and escape, is being much more blurred than before. What does this connectivity mean for education? And, we all have been very scared by the MOOCs. Now we are maybe a little bit less scared. But we do realize that the fact that we are connected to the world permanently will have a paradigm shift on education. We just don't know how yet. And then the other thing that is interesting also is that you can do your job by not necessarily being at your workplace. And this is happening to jobs that have got a very physical consequence. So not just necessarily jobs that are about exchanging information, giving instructions, reading and speaking to people. So if I'm thinking about the US military as an example, the whole notion of war, which is a very physical thing, you're creating a lot of damage locally. The whole notion of war is completely changing for these guys who are fighting a war, but they are like millions, or maybe not millions, but thousands of kilometers away from the action, and having incredible amount of impact at a physical location. So a lot of this connect between locations is possible now with technology. If I'm thinking not necessarily about jobs and the daily rhythm of life, and the weekly rhythm of life, of work, excuse me, but I'm thinking about your whole life as the time frame. This has also been questioned in a major way by technology. So in recent years, we are reading, there's a real belief that you can do something about the human life that is major. The paradigm until now was that technology is going to extend human life incrementally because we are going to be fighting diseases. And as you fight these diseases, essentially you are going to extend the human life. You're fighting conditions that prevent you from living longer. But now there is a whole different approach. And the approach is, why don't we attack the problem at the very basis? Why don't we look at aging, the biology of aging, which is, in many ways, Google would argue, an information problem. Gene sequencing, personal medicine. How can you crack this problem and create a qualitative change again? The idea, like I heard a Google guy speaking, the idea is not to extend human life by 2-3 years, but to maybe extend it by 50%. And this is definitely something that nobody has thought about even 10 years ago. So finally, in terms of our physicality. We used to talk, when we looked at these devices, you probably have heard the expression extended reality. The idea that you could merge virtual reality and you could overlay it on the physical world. A typical application that I was fascinated by, like 10 years ago was you could have a ruin. I'm coming from Europe, so there's lots of ruins. And you can have a ruin, say a castle or a fort or something like that. And you can overlay a picture as how it looked like back 200, 300 years ago. So this notion of extended reality, and you could explore these virtual worlds if you wish. What people are talking about is maybe extended humanity. Is the idea that you can really extend your capabilities, not just sort of like fool yourself with a picture about what something might have looked like a couple of years ago or 100 years ago, but maybe your perception, your capabilities can be extended. There are devices that are making you more or claiming to make you more efficient, more focused, more perceptive. You can create a virtual identity. And going back to this notion of extended life, there are services that are making sure that they perpetuate your life on some of the social media after your death. After all, what is it that you need to perpetuate that life? You need to do some postings, you need to have some pictures, and you don't need to be physically there. So somebody could theoretically make you continue living, say, on your Facebook page even after your death. Some of this technology allows us to be more efficient physically. They can improve our vision. They can improve our hearing. And I wanted to on this point to share a last piece of evidence that is a very interesting piece of research that one of our doctoral students, Shiri Malumad, does here at Columbia Business School. She's looking at to what extent do we think of our mobile phone as our physical extension. And she has evidence, it's preliminary research, but she has evidence that we do think of it as part of our body, essentially. Okay? And we were all kind of like talking to her and says, well, this is interesting, but what do you mean? So she's running experiments which show that, if I take your mobile phone, for example, and I kind of move it away physically from you, half a meter, maybe a meter, maybe a yard, 2 yards. If I move it away from you, you become more and more anxious. And your performance becomes worse and worse. So you cannot really pay attention to the task that you need to do. Your memory is going to be frailing, and so forth. So essentially, and what is interesting is that it's not a mobile phone moving away from you. It's your mobile phone. So if you're just moving away a mobile phone from you, nothing is going to happen. If it's yours, you really have this connection to it. And people are addicted to, because they think of it as part of their body. So all of this is showing that even a simple thing like this little device, which I would argue actually is a big deal, has got a qualitative change on the way we think about our physicality. And finally, let me stop here, talk about connectedness. Obviously are connected all the time. I mentioned that. And this is, again, becoming something, instead of something that we seek, is becoming something that is normal. So in fact, what we seek today is not connectedness, but disconnectedness at times, which is very different, I think, from the historical attitude towards media in general.